Welcome to Tech Talks, the first word in insurance, a podcast by Hyper Exponential. Hi, I'm Tom Chamberlain, VP of Customer Consulting at Hyper Exponential, and your host, otherwise known as Tech. I'm delighted to welcome you to the latest episode of Tech Talks. In this episode, we're going to be talking to Alice McGowan, who is the Transformation Consultant and Regional Lead of Inclusion, Diversity and Belonging Council at Allianz Global Corporate Specialty, AGCS for short. So let's get straight into it. So to kick us off, Alice, obviously we've worked together quite a few years ago now on a big pricing and underwriting transformation project, which I'm very happy to say was a big success, probably mostly thanks to you rather than me. But obviously I'm curious now because you've been involved in quite a lot of transformations across the business. So I'm just curious, what other transformations are you seeing insurers working on at the moment or have been working on for the last few years?
Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me today. I really appreciate it. It's great to be able to catch up again. I think during our time in Allianz, we have worked on a multitude of different projects together. And we started off with the pricing tools. And that's one of the key things that's happening right now as well, is the APTs, as we call them, the Allianz pricing tool, which was an Excel-based tool, but crucially at that time when you were the head of pricing, it was really important to have our actuaries involved because they were the ones that did the maths, basically. Okay. And I remember when we started that journey around about 2010, 2011, we did the pricing tools, and then we also did the extension to that, which was the reporting. And at the time, it was challenging to convince the underwriters the benefits of APTs because they were used to sort of, back of a cigarette packet and doing their pricing that way. Ironically, move forward like 13 years, and we're now replacing our pricing tools with radar. And yet our internal customers are like, no, give me the APTs back. So it takes about a decade to convince people of the benefit, but we get there in the end. I think the thing is, right, in terms of digital transformation and data management is absolutely key, right? Customers demand continue to evolve and reflect on social change, an increased focus on ESG concerns, environmental, social, governmental concerns, new engagement channels, shift in the economic landscape. And we've had a huge shift, both politically and socially, over the last 3 to 4 years in particular. I mean, back to back, Brexit, leaving the EU, Ukraine, COVID, so massive, big seismic shifts in the way that we think, the way that we communicate, and how do we engage them with our customers, both internally and externally. And as such, insurers, need to focus on identifying the customer needs that really ensure that the journey is easily accessible from start to finish. So we often talk about something called our value chain. What is our end-to-end value chain? From the moment the submission comes through the door to how it is handled and managed internally across the teams, from underwriting to our operations team to pricing, to the moment it is then booked, from if we have a front office system, if not, it's very much manually Excel based, to our back office system. And in the case of AGCS, we use Genius. Some of our LOBs have a front office system. Some of our LOBs are still using Excel-based manual processing. So digital transformation focuses on improving our customer journey and a firm's agility and responsiveness across the insurance sector. And as you know from your experience in AGCS, sometimes those transformations can be painful. It can take time. We are a complex company. We have and when you consider the ESG concerns and the trends of insurance, that even adds more to the complexity. And the thing is about technology, it is so fast paced. It is so fast paced. So when you start a transformation with one concept or solution, it might, by the time you've implemented it, already be outdated. So one of the key things that we're doing in AGCS right now is really looking holistically at our whole value chain, end to end, from the front office, mid office to the back office, and how the processes, are intertwined within that technological development. Now, we know the tech takes a little bit of time to get implemented, and we don't want our internal stakeholders to have to wait 2 years to see something. So what we are doing in the meantime is continuous improvement. So, for example, where perhaps it might be a while before a line of business gets a front office system, and they're using Excel-based manual intervention in order to capture their submission data, we're replacing that with Office 365.
Mm-hmm.
So we are using Office 365 almost like a front office system. So instead of putting the data into an Excel spreadsheet, you put the data into 365 instead. And it's really key that you have the minimum data requirements in there, because those minimum data requirements are absolutely essential for what needs to go into your back office. And, the operations minimum data requirements might vary from what the underwriter's view of what minimum data requirements is. So one of my roles is to go in and understand what that gap is, make sure the fields are available in there so that you're meeting both the needs of your underwriters at the front end and your operational support staff at the back end.
Just to pick up on one of your points around transformation taking quite a lot of time, and its technology is so fast paced that by the time you've implemented it, it's out of date. I mean, how do you get around that? You talked a little bit maybe about this sort of incremental improvements, but if you're doing a transformation project which is taking sort of 3 to 5 years, as you said, it's literally going to be starting again before you do it. And how do you manage that?
I mean, that is both the enjoyment and the pain of working in transformation, I think, is trying to, mindset is a really powerful thing, and it's trying to keep people on that journey. And if that journey is a fairly lengthy one, and you have resources changing throughout that time, then you've really got to look at what's happening right now, but essentially have like, a crystal ball that shows you what's going to happen in 5 years as well. And I think the idea is to try and offer some value, right? Give somebody something today, okay? And I think when you're looking at, pure project management, if you think, I'm going to throw a few things out, being agile and safe, Prince 2, there's lots of different, transformation methodologies out there. And I think some people think, when they think about Prince 2, it's like, right, you've got to have everything up front before you can even start doing any coding or any change, right? And agile is all about, you do a little bit now, and then you go live with something, and then you do a little bit, and then you go live with something. It's really tough, though, to be agile in such a complex, technologically challenging company like AGCS. Given all the countries that we serve and the size of our business as well. So therefore, you've really got to look at, what are your quick wins? Okay, how can you, and I can give you an example. For example, we went in a couple of years ago, we did something called Simply Smarter Together. It was like, a 9-week project where we went into a particular lob and we looked exactly at how they did their processing today. So what the underwriters did when they really did key in the submission information and how long it really took. And, don't get me wrong, we've got some solid hard workers, okay? But when we actually then added up all the numbers, they were doing 23-hour days. And I remember going back to the regional head saying, don't get me wrong, I know your team works super hard, but that is just not physically possible. Yeah. That's not happening. So when they say it takes 450 minutes to do the initial review of the submission, then you're like,
Yeah, no,
no.
maybe not.
It might take you 450 minutes to do the pricing part because we know that's more complicated. But, not to do the domicile check, which is to send an email to another country to find out if they've also got the same submission request from the broker, right? So we went in, we calculated all of this, and we were able to actually make some really solid time savings, but in a 3-month period, and that really made a huge difference. And any transformation exercise, you must have the buy-in of the leadership. It is absolutely crucial. If you do not have that, it will fail. Okay. And sometimes you get people saying, oh, you want a top-down approach, or you want a bottom-up approach, or you want a top and a bottom approach. Like, at the end of the day, you need everyone who's involved in the process engaged and understanding. And what we did, which was really, really helpful, is we had the people in their teams in a single room, okay, looking at each other and talking to each other about what caused them pain along the value chain. Because sometimes you can get a little bit blinkered and you just see your day job ahead of you, and you're maybe not so aware of what's happening in somebody else's team. And once that level of understanding is then generated, people are then less defensive, and they're more progressive in terms of working together. Collaboration, absolutely key to any success. It takes time to change the mindset. They say, I think, psychologically about 6 months to convince people to change to a new way of working, and then about another 10 years to undo that and get them to work in another way. I mean, it's the psychology of transformation is actually really, really interesting, and probably one of the most enjoyable parts of my job, because when I was working in New York, the Americans have a slightly different approach to how our German colleagues work, to our Parisian colleagues, to our London colleagues. So
I guess this probably preempted one of the things I was going to ask around what are the sort of main barriers to transformation, but I think you've sort of talked about it a fair bit. It does sound like this, the cultural change and getting everyone on board. That's doing that. Obviously, there's budget constraints, and companies need to be figuring out what is the best part of the transformation. I mean, there's so many areas. We talked a lot about pricing and underwriting, but there's lots of areas of the business that can be transformed, and trying to find that right. The right places to do it in the right sequence, I guess, is kind of challenging for a company. You'd like to do everything all at once, but not always possible.
I think you've got to understand what the trends are, and you've got to understand, what projection of what's actually coming, like the whole macroeconomic headwinds that are heading our way at the moment. We're still feeling the impact of Brexit. We're still shaded by the pandemic and so forth. So that feeds into every sort of transformation initiative that you have, but it can be just as simple as having to go in and ask for more money is always a tough conversation. Losing key resources, that's really tough as well. I mean, I dreaded the day you were going to turn around to me during the APT days and say, I've got a new role, because you were my subject matter expert. If you to try and have you replace it, that's tough. So, you have to try and you have to balance your resources as well in terms of the expertise.
Yeah, completely. And before we jump on to another topic, so any kind of other sort of top tips you'd have for kind of how to really execute on a transformation project and make it successful, because you've obviously been part of many successful projects like this.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I first joined AGCS at the time, in terms of the London market, it was like, you do 2-3 years, you go to your next job, and you keep moving. And I think the cycle of, your career in London is probably much more mobile. I'm coming up for my 15th anniversary in AGCS now, and I'm like, gosh, where did that time go? But I've worked on so many different transformations. I've worked on pricing, I've worked on regulation with solvency, I worked on ArcNet, which was a tool that we built for our risk consulting business. I've worked on the Americas transformation. I've worked in HR. I've worked in processing. I've worked most recently trying to trying to eliminate these manual Excel handover sheets and actually get something more automated. So doing the robotics side, and every day is a different day, and I think what's really key is when you're going into any sort of transformation exercise, I think I count myself fortunate now, having got quite an extensive network. I know immediately like who I can call upon. Who I'm not an expert, in Genius, but I know who to go to help me understand our mid office system. So that really makes a huge difference. And we're all human beings at the end of the day, and work is important. It's a big part of our lives, but we also have our personal lives as well. So, going into any sort of transformation exercise, it's trying to get to know the people you're going to be working with, and what are their needs, and listening. I cannot say it enough. I'm actually partially deaf. So I sit there, I really do try to listen to people. People do a lot of talking, and not so much listening. And it sounds really easy, and it's not rocket science. And yet it's such a hard thing to do, to stay quiet in a room and just really listen to somebody. But it is a valuable skill to have.
And then you'll hear the pain points, you'll hear the reasons for the change, and then you can drive the project accordingly. So
yeah, absolutely.
It sounds like
and that's when you get into sort of like negotiation, right? Really listening, particularly if you have two conflicting sides that don't really want to meet in the middle at the moment, because they both feel that their pain is more important and greater than the other, is hearing them out and then getting them to the point where you can then negotiate with them, come up with a compromise.
Absolutely. And as you said, we're all human beings, right? This is part of our lives, but there's also other parts going on, and that's a nice sort of segue into sort of another part of your job, I guess, which is around I've kind of referred to it as diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know it's a slightly different sort of naming at Allianz, but I sense the insurance industry has been slightly slow than other industries on the uptake of this and sort of raising the importance. But you're much closer to this now, so I'm curious to how you see this area in insurance, maybe versus other industries. Are we doing a lot right? Are we still doing a lot wrong? What's your thoughts on this?
Well, please feel free to challenge me at any point, because that's what this is all about. When we're talking about, diversity and inclusion, people come in from different perspectives. Okay, so my way of thinking might not be yours, but I did give some thought to this. It's an area that I'm very, very passionate about. But when you think about what are the barriers to implementing, D&I, or as we call it in AGCS, IDB, inclusion, diversity, and belonging. It could be, lack of goals and metrics. It could be inadequate training. It could be no buy-in from the leadership. You might have budgetary restrictions. You've got cultural resistance, But actually, I was thinking about this from a different perspective. In order to eliminate the barriers to diversity and inclusion, maybe we need to think about the insurance industry as a whole and how we approach that. And you're thinking about the insurance industry, forgive me, but it is predominantly white male, okay? And if you want to make the insurance industry more diverse, then how do we go about that? So people think, some companies are doing brilliant. Like look at Aviva. I mean, they have their own, D&I team with its own individual budget. Okay, in AGCS, we're a couple of people permanent, but otherwise it's all voluntary. And it varies. Like, for example, my council in the UK, we usually have numbers of around about 15 volunteers, so we can spread the load. But say APAC, they've got 2, So and they're in the US, they have a different approach, to France, to Germany, and so forth. So again, harmonization is absolutely crucial. Okay, but I think when we're thinking about what are the barriers to D&I, I think we need to think about the insurance industry itself. It is a very, very conservative industry. Okay, if we were able to change our our view of insurance, if we were able to change the mindset of how people think about insurance, maybe that would have a knock-on effect to how we approach diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, you said I could disagree with you. I don't. I absolutely think this is the right way of looking at it. I personally took quite a number of months off for shared parental leave, which I think at the time was sort of viewed as a kind of like, oh, really? You're going to take all that time off? It's like, well yeah, it's important to me. I am who I am because of not just my work, but my personal life and my family balance, and that goes the same for everyone. And I wouldn't be where I am or who I am today without that. And I think the industry needs to be really careful that it doesn't forget these sort of things and embrace like everyone's even down to flexibility of working, right? Being able to do hybrid or like I drop off my kids at school or pick them up from school as well. And I have days where I want to do that. Allowing people to do that's going to really sort of help it. I definitely don't think we're there yet. I think there's so much more that we can be doing on this and really pushing that. It's good. It's good that companies like Alice do have these sort of councils. I was really impressed to hear that you said Aviva had a full-on sort of full-time function who are dedicated to do that.
Council,
right.
Yeah.
I've seen it in other industries as well. When we were looking in the diversity council, we were spending a lot of time with Barclays, who also have that sort of setup.
The banking, they're like leaps and bounds ahead of insurance. They got the money though. Funding makes a huge difference, right?
It does.
But I think one of the things I wanted to talk about was I had a conversation with it happened to be a white male, but a good colleague that I'm good friends with about 6 months ago. And we were chatting about what was coming up for 2023. And they were like, Alice, you know, I'm not disabled. I'm not gay. Thankfully, I've got, 3 healthy children. I've never lost a baby. I just, what value can I offer? None of these subject matters, touch me personally. And I'm like, well, it doesn't, you don't have to be one-legged gay and have had a miscarriage to be part of forwarding inclusion and diversity. You can be an ally. I know people who have children with autism and ADHD, so I go out of my way to try and research that topic because it's really, really crucial. That's such a huge talent area. We are just completely sidestepping. Just because you might be neurodiverse does not mean that you cannot work in the insurance industry. If you look at the ratios of people in this country that are neurodiverse, then there are probably already a good handful of them in your companies. You just don't know about it, or they don't know about it. So it's about trying to really generate awareness, okay, so that people understand, what the subject matter around neurodiversity is, or disability, or pride, for example, so that the more information that is out there and accessible, the greater your understanding, the more approachable you are to the topic, and therefore the more inclusive you feel into the topic. Okay, unlike that chap that I was speaking to who felt like I can't offer any value. Yes, you can. You can be an ally.
Yeah, it's the inclusion part, right? You need to have that because people need to feel a part of what it is, and yeah, not feel that they, as you said, it's addressed once a year, if that, but is actually just an inclusive part of the business. And as I said, then it can be more celebrated as potentially the reason why you are so good at what you're doing. So yeah, I agree with all of those things you're saying, and it very much sounds like the people who are doing it really right are those ones who are not like really investing in it, like really spending the time, spending the money, having that as a sort of core function that their role is to push and promote all of this, and then really good things will happen. That's actually quite comforting to hear. I was a bit worried that we would still be talking about, oh yeah, it's really hard, it's not really working, people aren't embracing it. But it doesn't sound like that anymore. It really does sound like there is a shift happening, albeit still slowly.
I mean, how did you feel it was in AGCS during your time? I mean, like I said, we've come a little bit late to the table. We've still got a long way to go, but I think we benefit from the fact that we have some really passionate volunteers
Yeah.
that really care, want to make a
I
difference.
think that was still the feeling again when I was there as well. You know, that there was a number of people who were very passionate about it, and again, I genuinely felt a little bit awkward at the start, probably being a white middle-aged man, because I'm literally the problem here, not the problem here. But it felt kind of strange to be part of that. And I got up and did a number of talks on flexible working, shared parental leave, because that was something that I was really passionate about. And one of the sessions we did at the Dive-In Festival, which was really awesome. I think that's still going on. It was about sort of shared parental leave and maternity leave and flexible working. 90% of the audience were women. And I was sitting there on a panel with 3 other women and absolutely terrified. I don't really know what I have to add here. But it was really amazing, because I talked about sort of like my sort of like shared parental leave, my paternity leave as well, but also how it sort of worked in the team and the way we can allow for flexible working and stuff. And as it turns out, actually, quite a lot of people in the audience came up after me and said, this is what we need, right? We need people who are embracing this, as you said, like the word ally wasn't used, but that's kind of the thing, right? Who are, again, pushing, promoting this and allowing or really actively, making that happen in the business, so that people do have that inclusion side. And that was actually a really nice surprise. So I felt very proud of the fact that we did quite a lot of stuff on that. But I think it was just very much in its infancy, and I think now it sounds like you're taking it to the next level as well, which is really cool.
Well, I think it's a brave soul that goes first, right? And we need more people like you, Tom, that are going first. It's scary. It's scary to put yourself out there, to share your story, and that story's then out there. That information is out there. It's never contained within you any longer, and that can be a really scary transition to go through. I know somebody who very, very bravely talked about a sexual assault that she had experienced 20 years ago, never ever talked to anybody about it. And she came out and spoke about it last December when we were talking about domestic violence. And it's a really scary journey to come out there, but we need people like that, those brave souls, to go out there and do that. The changes that you see now in AGCS, leading through your example, we've extended maternity cover from 14 weeks to 6 months. We issued a baby loss policy, firstly in the UK, because the UK, it just that little bit easier. But now that's been implemented globally. We had a miscarriage awareness session in May. So, and that's all off the back of those initial baby steps, like people like yourself and our other colleagues in AGCS. So, would I like it to be faster? Absolutely. So when we get a dedicated team with exclusive funding, then I'm sure it will be. But at the moment, we rely upon our passionate volunteers.
Fair enough. That's amazing to hear, Alice. It sounds like you're doing some tremendous things there. And I've got just one more question on a completely different topic, which I just asked to everyone, just around the sort of insurance market and stuff. And I think maybe you've probably got the answer to this from the start of the chat. But as we maybe inevitably head towards a soft market in insurance, what's the sort of main things you think insurers, or main thing an insurer and MGA reinsurers should be doing to combat that or prepare themselves?
You say we're moving towards a soft market, but it does depend on the lob.
It does. That's true. That's true.
Right. Okay. So some lobs might, still be very much in a hard market and feeling it. And some might be in between, and some are already at the soft market side. So I think I would love to give you a really straightforward answer. This is your approach. But in the complexity of the market that we operate in, particularly of all the socioeconomic and political change that we are going through, then you need to, I think, be probably a little bit more wider thinking in terms of your approach, definitely. And what does that mean? I go back to really got to understand, what is your customer really asking for, and really have a a relationship with your customer so that you can meet their needs, but that they also understand your needs as well. One of the challenges that the underwriters always say to us is, we can't provide that data to ops because we can't get it from the brokers. We're entirely dependent on them to give us that information. So that's absolutely crucial. Relationships, listening, understanding where the trends are, appreciating, particularly from the ESG perspective, what's going to be happening over the next 24 months, the housing market, what's the US going to be doing? We've got a US election coming up. We've got UK elections coming up, all within the next 3 years. It's going to have a significant impact on the way that we operate, both in insurance and across other industries that we also insure. So that is something to be very mindful of.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, absolutely. But
so basically, you've got to come up with 101 different models.
I think the key,
depending on which way we're going to go.
I think the key word I heard again there was, it's like listening and just being aware, right? Just like having, like, there were so many things going on, and having that understanding, pausing, thinking about it, listening to what's going on, listening to the people. That's and then sort of coming up with some strategy around it. But
can I just mention one thing about claims as well? Like, I think one of the things that AGCS, why they did so well during the pandemic and COVID, is that we were very proactive, but we were also very reactionary when it came to the claims. And that's what your customers care about. They want that assurance. They want that reassurance that, they are going to be supported. So, I think claims is absolutely crucial in getting that right.
Yeah, I mean, insurance is effectively the business of paying claims. That's the absolute reason why they're here, and helping businesses and individuals get back to where they need to carry on their lives and their work. So, yeah, couldn't agree more as well. Perfect. Well, that's us at time. That was amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to come have a chat. It was really awesome. And thank you very much. And it's lovely to catch up again.
Thank you very much, Tom. Take care.
That concludes another episode of Tech Talks. If you've enjoyed today's show and want to find out more about the topics discussed, head over to hyperexponential.com to gain access to a range of resources related to this episode. The link is in the description. And of course, wherever you're listening to the podcast, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave us a comment or review. Thanks so much for joining us, and see you next time. Bye.